We start with the President of the United fucking States being taken to a bog-standard civilian hospital for life-saving treatment because reasons. Whilst over at the baddie's lair in Russia, Gravik tells Pagan to stop celebrating their recent mission, because it was an utter failure given they set out to kill the American president and instead he's still alive and they've only managed to kill a middle-aged Australian with a beer belly.
Aww.
And said Pagan fella then gets all defensive when he's blamed for not setting off World War III already. And after questioning his boss's competence, he goes and gets himself penetrated, but not in a good way. Gravik then calls the rest of his nameless shape-shifting goons a right bunch of nobodies, and then tells them to go kill that pensioner what loves reciting Ponzi poetry and stop questioning his leadership already. Meanwhile, back at the hospital, that phony fakey Colonel Rhodey fella what loves doing black and trans face tries to visit President Ritson to see how he's doing, but soon gets jumped by an uber paranoid Fury, who reckons that coming over here and trying to visit a patient without even bringing a bunch of grapes just ain't fucking on, son. I mean, coming over here to try and finish assassinating a sitting president just ain't fucking on, son. But he just says, you better put your shiny tool away and listen up, mate, because I've totally released that video of my boss shooting up that generic white woman in broad daylight whilst dressed as you, so you're about to be in a world of trouble, pal. And Nicky Boy just can't believe that this alien imposter would stitch him up like a kipper despite giving them asylum on Earth 30 years ago. God, what an ungrateful git. Anyway, after the opening titles, we cut to London, where some ginger fella is totally watching said video footage of Nick shooting up that generic white woman in broad daylight now it's been released publicly across the world and he's wanted for murder and stuff. But suddenly, MI6 agent Sonia Falsworth bursts in and totally shoots him in the leg after he refuses to tell her where some bird called Dr. Dalton is at. And in a shocking twist what no one could ever see coming, turns out the pale ginger sitting in direct sunlight without at least factor 50 sun cream is totally one of them naughty scroll fellas in ginger face.
No way!
Elsewhere, a bunch of black youths are meeting up to talk business in their local cafe like the new season of Top Boy just dropped. And they think it's a good idea to suck a punch and then totally ambush a superpowered super scroll. And before you can say, this'll end well, Gravik smacks them all up even with a bag over his head, before hulking out and unleashing his woody powers again. And it looks like it's curtains for that beta boy Beto, what then thinks it's another good idea to call the superpowered alien with a knife to his throat a monster. So he then gets himself carved up like a common hog, whilst Gravik just yells, "Who's the top boy now, motherfuckers?" Later, Gaia meets up with this Fast and Furious Nick fella and says she totally wants to bury her Australian daddy. But he just says, shut up about your phony foreign father and totally tell me about all the secret DNA that Gravik's stolen and keeping in his basement. And she says that although he has a pretty cool collection of alien superpowered DNA down there, what he was really looking for is something called the Harvest. Meanwhile, we catch back up with MI6 agent Sonia Falsworth, who's illegally broken into Dr. Dalton's super secret illegal lab and demands to know all about that super secret illegal super machine what she built for him in his super illegal secret Russian basement. Elsewhere, Gaia is just sitting in a little van and morbidly staring at her dead daddy with a porky paunch before meeting up with her old mate Vara, aka Nick's lawfully wedded Floozy, who then proceeds to rudely stick a gat in her face. So naturally, she asks her for help in burying her pops, because he'd recently put on a lot of weight sitting around in local pubs and gorging on a full English all day. But Vara just says, well, I ain't much of a gravedigger, but I do know some fucking good poetry. Whilst back at the hospital, phony fakey transracial Rhodey tries to convince the Poters that it was the Russians what totally tried to blow him to Kingdom Come and not in a good way, and that they were totally working with them naughty scroll fellas all along. And instead of just shapeshifting into the leader of the free world and not having to go through all this tedious hassle, the Colonel tries to convince his mate to authorise a military strike on the Skrull HQ. And because said Skrull HQ is totally located in Russia, that'll totally mean triggering World War III for sure. And before you can say, shouldn't you at least run this past the VP or fucking Congress first? We cut to Nick chatting with Gravik on the phone, who says that if Fury gives him the Harvest that he'll call off World War III and totally stop doing all these bad things. Anyway, because he couldn't give two furious fucks about climate change, said Fury fella then boards a private jet, where some bloke who doesn't even get a name or basic introduction to this series gives him some kind of gadget thing for when he gets to Russia. Meanwhile, Gaia gets on with Talos's funeral, but can't remember the special scrully prayer what they traditionally say when one of them kicks the bucket. So Vara does it for her and promptly starts praying in an alien language, which roughly translates to, "Here lies the body of a shape-shifting alien what loved cosplaying as an Australian Caucasian." Or some shit. Anyway, a little later, they then get jumped by Gravik's goons, because they clearly don't have any respect or decency for crushing what has to be the world's shittest wake that's tragically only attended by 2 people. But the pair of small ladies soon fend off said disrespectful goons using the power of plot armour and stunning and brave feminism, bro. And the feminism here is so strong that one poor fucker doesn't even make it to the floor before he's blasted mid-air by Emilia Clarke with his shotgun. And before you can say, "Oh god, it's Terminator Genesis all over again," they've cleared out the heavily armed baddies without even getting a scratch. Huzzah! Elsewhere, wanted international murderer Nick Fury gets through Scandinavian border control by wearing a Mission Impossible mask and doing whiteface. Liberties! Anyway, after Gaia and Vara part ways, MI6 agent Sonia Fallsworth drives Fury through Finland and toward the Russian border, where she's pretty shocked and embarrassed to learn that Colonel James Rhodey is a Skrull despite him having changed his entire face back in 2010 when Marvel recast the role for Iron Man 2.
Bruh.
And before you can say, had they not even checked if each other is a Skrull before continuing their super secret and highly classified intel discussion? This too fast, too furious Nick fella brings her up to speed, and then explains that Gravik really wants something called the Harvest, which is a vial of superpowered DNA from Earth's mightiest superheroes. What Fury had his Skrull team collect from the battlefield after the good guy smacked up that giant purple alien with a scrotum chin in Endgame. Some shit. And he totally feels responsible for now bringing the planet to the brink of World War III, given he was the one who used an illegal alien and his illegal army to scrape up dried blood from an illegal battle. And now said illegal alien has totally gone rogue and wants that super juice for his own illegal army. And that's why Nick left his space vacation and came back to Earth and shit. So naturally, she asks why he hasn't called his Avengers buddies down to help with this whole World War III thing. But he just gives a bullshit excuse about it being personal and not wanting to depend on mythological gods to swoop in and save their butts all the time. But the real reason, of course, being that Evans is too expensive, Hemsworth has a new franchise, and Ruffalo's too busy having socialist meltdowns on Twitter and shit. Anyway, he then retrieves the vial of super juice from a high-tech tombstone in the middle of a random Scandinavian wood, before getting both tooled up and suited up. And before you can say, why does he have personal items in multiple compartments when all this stuff would have easily fit in one? Nicky Boy goes back to cosplaying as a pirate, before winning the Pun of the Year award by saying, "Let's finish this," whilst walking about in Finland.
Nice.
And that's it. That's the epi. Though my favourite part was when Fury was chilling in the private jet, just as a bloke turned up from that Black Widow film that no fucker watched, and the show didn't even bother to remind us who the heck he was, given that was one of Marvel's least viewed films that came out 2 years ago in the middle of a pandemic and was also super forgettable to boot. But anyway, on to the finale. We start with Nick Fury in a beanie calling up his floozy who popped off a shot at him the other day, to say that he's got to go and won't be back for a while, as he then blasts his way through some alien guards to go tear some shit up. After the artificial opening titles, which again last a ludicrously long 2 minutes and 14 seconds, we cut to London, where the American POTUS is still chilling in hospital after an army of rogue aliens shot up his motorcade and shit, and has to decide whether or not to retaliate against them naughty Russians what phony fakey Colonel Rhodey assures him were behind it all, even though the president of said naughty Russians completely denies it, and says it's totally one of them false flag things what you Yankee boys like to do. And after Rhodey presents satellite evidence of Russian tanks taking positions on Ukrainian and Finnish borders, President Ritson finds himself in a right pickle deciding whether or not to bomb the Ruskies and be the man who officially starts World War III. But Rhodey just says it's totally them smelly commies, bro, so memorise this speech and go tell everyone about it on TV already. Elsewhere, Fury heads to his meeting with Gravik after totally agreeing to give him the Harvest last epi because reasons. Whilst back at the Hozzy, that scrully Skrull Rhodey fella gets an urgent call from MI6 agent Sonia Fallsworth, telling him to get the president the heck out of Dodge, cause Fury's on his way over to smack her bitch up, given he's gone all paranoid and thinks you're a bunch of shape-shifting aliens and shit. Meanwhile, the real Fury finally confronts his arch-nemesis Gravik in his nuclear Russian basement, and he desperately tries to take his iodine tablets now he's severely weakened by all the lingering radiation all around. But Gravik just laughs and says real men don't need no pussy old bills, and just offers him a cheeky snifter instead. And because he's an experienced and highly trained super spy who's survived decades of dangerous missions based on his sharp wit and instincts alone, he decides to take up the offer of free booze from a homicidal bloke what hates his guts, and totally gulps down the flask of liquid what could have had anything inside it. Anyway, instead of just killing him there and then, Gravik starts whining on about his backstory, and how he now wears the face of the first man he killed when Fury sent him on an espionage mission as part of his unsanctioned Black Ops mercenary team years ago. And Nick just can't believe he's being lectured on morality by an illegal immigrant what does blackface for fun.
No!
But this Gravik fella reckons that if he'd just done what was promised and found a planet for them to go live on, then none of this would be happening. But Fury soon reveals that he couldn't do his one job and find them said fresh planet to colonise, because there are no suitable planets to live on in the cosmos. And before you can say, haven't we seen dozens of them in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies alone? Colonel Scrody sets about moving that POTUS fella what loves getting blown up in motorcades, even as all his Secret Service goons start getting deaded all around him. Whilst Fury then hands over that MacGuffin harvest thing that Gravik wants, so his super machine can give him a smorgasbord of superpowers in return for him calling off the strike, sodding off to space and taking his Skrully pals with him. But unfortunately, he totally still wants to do that World War III thing, and no pussy old dying bloke in a beanie is going to stop him. Elsewhere, Colonel Scrody is totally captured by MI6 agent Sonia Fallsworth when he apparently fails to check behind a door before trying to move the president to a secure location, whilst Gravik inserts the harvest into his super machine and soon gets roided up. And it looks like it's curtains for the #1 pirate cosplayer who's also trying to infringe on Tim Paul's brand.
Bruh.
But in a shocking twist, what I genuinely somehow didn't see coming the first time I watched this, turns out the totally real Nick Fury, what just spent 10 minutes explaining his emotional reasoning for doing all these bad things, was totally not the real Nick Fury at all. But instead, that British Gaia bird.
No way!
And he just can't believe he got smacked up by a 5'2" little girl, what he thought he had shot to death at the end of episode 3, and despite presumably coming back to find her body gone off screen. As the real Nick Fury takes out the last of Scrody's goons at the hospital. Anyway, the two secret Super Skrulls what love super secretly invading then have a truly terrible CGI battle, with the worst animation of a giant green character since fucking She-Hulk. Whilst Fury tries to convince the POTUS that Colonel Rhodey is totally one of them naughty Skrull fellas what loves doing terrorism and stuff. And if he goes ahead with this World War III thing, then he'll totally be nuking all the real people they've stashed under their nuclear compound in pods to maintain the psychic connection for their shape-shifting abilities. Or some shit. And this Ritson fella finds himself in yet another pickle trying to work out who's a Skrull and who ain't. And before you can say, why can't someone shoot the Colonel's hand to see if he bleeds purple like the rest of them alien peeps? Gaia and Gravik continue to pummel each other into next Tuesday, before she summons the powers of Captain Marvel and punches a giant fuck-off hole in his chest after he uses his last words to insult a deaded Australian daddy, whilst phony fakey Rhodey promptly takes his chance to finish the fight. But this too fast too furious Nick fella is just too fast and furious for this fella, and totally blows his alien brains out all over a hospital floor. God, no wonder so many diseases spread in the NHS if this is what's going on in intensive care wards these days.
Bruh.
So, President Ritson promptly calls off the strike after almost getting manipulated into destroying his own race and planet by a cosplaying alien nutjob. Whilst back at the Russian base, Gaia frees all the trapped humans what have been strapped into pods because reasons. And before you can say, how are all these people still alive when they've been down here exposed to and soaking in lethal background radiation for so long? President Ritson then indeed goes on TV and tells the American people all about how he was almost going to get them blown to Kingdom Come just because he wouldn't dare question a black man and why he's been acting strangely for years and also smelled like a lizard. And because he was so humiliated, he now totally overcompensates by deeming every single off-world born species an enemy combatant, and thereby effectively declares war on half the members of the Avengers team. And also a bunch of children, given all of the new Asgard refugees were also recently welcomed to Earth over in the Thor movies are still a thing, and yet never seem to get mentioned here even though it's totally relevant. Anyway, This furious Nick Tokyo Drift fella then reunites with his alien bae, and she asks him whether he loves her for her or just loves her phony fakey chocolatey face. And he insists that he loves her for her, bro, no matter what colour face she has on. And then bizarrely asks for her forgiveness despite her being the one that inveigled her way into his life and was then told to murder him last week. What? Elsewhere, Gaia gets jumped by MI6 agent Sonia Volsworth, who basically tells her that with great power comes great responsibility now she's had the entire power set of the Avengers stuffed inside her fine-ass booty and has effectively become the most powerful being in the cosmos. And she then enters into the same kind of deal with the government that her dopey dad did. Even though the last time a shady agency made a deal to use Skrulls as an unsanctioned Black Ops team, one of the members went mad and tried to start World War III a few years later. Fury then bollocks the actual sitting president of the United States for making a hateful racist speech on TV, where he promised to kill every last illegal alien on Earth. Cause much like our real world POTUS, he was supposed to unite the country, but has since just made things 10 times worse with his bigoted buffoonery. No! Cause turns out his on-screen dangerous rhetoric was super dangerous, given it's totally incited violence across the country and now produced vigilante hit squads going around and murdering anyone they suspect of being naughty shapeshifters. Even people who are just a bit weird and smell funny, like the UK Prime Minister and presumably Grumpy Thunberg.
How dare you!
But Ritson just says he don't care what some washed up one-eyed ex-super spy thinks, because he just wants these little green weirdos off his planet already. And after MI6 agent Sonia Volsworth shows Gaia a warehouse full of pod humans and thereby setting up a sequel series by implying the secret invasion of Skrulls problem is even worse than they all thought, Vara meets up with Fury in a small field, where he says he could use her help in going off world to negotiate peace talks between the Skrulls and the Kree. And she totally agrees, despite him effectively just saying that his sole character arc has gone from feeling bad about ditching the Skrulls to go live in space, and now at the end, he's making the exact same choice again to ditch them and live in space, whilst leaving the rest of the Skrulls to be hunted down and murdered by racist hit squads all over the world.
What the fuck?
But she just shrugs, before reverting to her original form. And he still can't believe that he's been balls deep in a scaly lizard freak for years. But he just knocks her face off all the same, and bringing a whole new meaning to interracial relations. And before you can say,
What is this, Baldies Unite? Yeah! Baldies Unite!
We end on the said newly reunited lovers entering the Sabre spaceship, whilst the show takes one last opportunity to thoroughly disappoint by being the first Marvel show to not feature any post-credit scenes. And that's it. That's the finale. But man, what a rushed and incomprehensible mess. And I do mean the epi and not my video, you cheeky gits. And there's still so many questions left. I mean, how did Gravik die from a chest wound when he explicitly had regeneration abilities from his extremist powers? And what assurances do the American public have that the president currently on TV warning them about secret Skrulls ain't a secret Skrull himself? And moreover, won't people now lose trust in every institution and public figure across the whole of society? And won't they go mad and burn down cities in sheer paranoia? Surely it'll be like the Salem witch trials all over again. Like, if you don't quite fancy your neighbour's idea for a conservatory extension, then you can just accuse the poor sod of being a Skrull and promptly get his planning permission cancelled by the local council.
Nice.
Oh, I don't know. Again, it's Marvel, so screw thinking and shit. Though my favourite part was when President Ritson finally got proof that his right-hand man was a shape-shifting alien terrorist, and then happily went along with the other two spies in the room without seemingly casting any suspicion that they too might be scaly lizard freaks in disguise. Like seriously, at least give them a paper cut and see if they bleed weird colours and shit. But anyway, that's the plot and that's your lot. Considering that bell thing so you don't miss any future recaps. Tell me if you like this series in the comments if you have time, and I'll see you in the next one.